So thank you all. Let's see. I just need a report out. Joshua, please.
Thanks, President Estromera. There were no reportable action out of closed session. However, in the interest of transparency, we wanted to note that no final lease had been approved in 3B.
Thank you.
Final what?
Lease.
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 Okay.
No final rentals. Let me say, I just noticed that the agenda doesn't include our salute. So I'd ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That has a tendency of bringing us all together. Yes. So now's the time for open public comment. I have a couple requests, but they're for different items. So we'll wait till those items come up. Anybody else want to address us on any issue that's not on the agenda? Could you get a card, or you? It says agenda item 6.
Yeah.
Could you wait until we get to it, please?
Oh, sorry.
Now's the time for the public to address us on any issue not on the agenda.
President Estromera, item 6 is general public comment.
It is.
Oh, it is. Yep. Number 6. I think we were in the meeting minutes. of the
Sorry.
last meeting.
I'm at 9. Yeah. Okay, come on, address us then, Ms. Jardine.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Thank you very much, Director Estromera. My name is Deirdre Desjardins with California Water Research, and I wanted to say that I think this pause in the project is a good idea. I am a physicist. I have been making comments on the tunnel design and sea level rise since 2012. The project has not been evaluated for high sea level rise, and I recently discovered that your simulation that the intakes would stay fresh did not consider any levee failure north of Ileton. It has never been evaluated whether those intakes will stay fresh if any of the levees north of Ileton fail. So you can't cherry pick your disaster scenario that way. If sea level rise is likely to affect the entire delta, not just the South Delta, and to the extent you want this project to work through 2100, you have to, and you want it to work for 5 to 10 feet of sea level rise, as Wade Crowfoot said, you have to do that modeling. You need a grid, and I looked, the grid that they used was only for the Hayward scenario earthquake. It never went north of Ileton. You've got to have the actual 3D modeling. The scientists have been telling you this for years. So now is the time to really make sure this project will provide a reliable water supply with sea level rise. It will have a finite lifetime. You need to figure out what that lifetime will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jardine. Mr. Dan Whaley?
The issue that I see that's sort of addressed in item 9, but it's not specifically addressed, is we have a $93 million contract that needs to be put on hold or put on stay until there is an actual project. And my understanding is that there's $20 million per year to a company in Texas that we're paying to design a tunnel project that we now are starting over on. And so my understanding is we should do something now to stop them from doing any further work and expending any further of our money, our tax dollars on this project until we know what the project actually is. And even if that's going to cost us money for breaching the agreement, that needs to be done now as opposed to 6 months from now, 9 months from now, when they've started work on a project that you signed a contract for before we had a completed project. And so somehow that needs to be addressed, thought about. You guys are all business people. You understand that when someone signs a contract, they're under a legal obligation to do certain things, and we need to address that immediately so that before additional time and money is lost on a project that now needs to be redefined, we address that issue and take it to a conclusion. Even if it means that the state of California has to pay a couple $1 million for the profit they would have earned from this $20 million in the first year of their contract, we need to address that and specifically face that so that we don't continue to spend money where we haven't used it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whaley. I have no further requests to address us on issues that are not on the agenda this afternoon, so I'll move right along to approval of minutes. April 18th. Entertain a motion.
I move for approval of minutes.
There's a second? I'll second it. I don't think either of you were here.
I'm abstaining.
Me too.
So, okay, well, let's continue it till we'll bring it back at the next meeting. So we'll move right along then to item 9. We'll start with A. Yes, Counsel.
Yes. We have attached in your packet a new policy and procedure around purchasing and procurement. We need that as part of the stand-up of our organization. I just want to highlight a couple of items in there that are in the board memo I gave you. It allows a contracting authority of up to $250,000 for the executive director. That would include change orders as well, and then also for construction contracts as long as the aggregate of change orders was under 5%. It allows for sole sourcing of contracts as long as they are general purchases under $75,000 or public works contracts under $25,000. It defines competitive bidding to allow also an inclusion of best value pre-qualification and or low bid solicitations. It also incorporates what is extremely important to us, the small and disabled veterans business, and we've added a local preference program that we hope to, that will be developing and implementing as part of the execution of this program. And then authorizes me to develop the administrative procedures that are consistent with this policy.
Thank you, Catherine. Questions?
So are we dealing with the whole of 9 at this point?
Oh, just the 9A.
Just 9A. Okay. There was a
Just
part.
procurement policy.
Okay. There's a part of 9A where we're dealing with emergency contracts. So like number 9A.
Yeah, that's an
14.
exemption. It's one of the stated exemptions in my ability to sign contracts. Is during an emergency, I'm not limited to $250,000.
Right. No, that I agreed with right
Right.
there. I guess what I was having a problem with was it was saying something about within 7 days period for contacting the board unless there was, we were within 2 weeks of a meeting. And I was thinking that an emergency is important enough. I would just leave it at the board has to be contacted within 7 days period.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Make that change. Yes, Steve.
Question on local preference. I agree that it's important, but the definition, devil's in the definition.
That's right.
Has that been developed yet, or is that to be developed?
No, as it says in there, consistent with laws and regulations. So we need to do some research on how we can maximize the potential opportunity for, this is an enormous program in the Delta, and as much as this program can benefit the Delta, we want to try to do that. So we need to do a lot of research on how we do that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up, Steve. I think that's right. We've got to come back with a much better detailed definition of sole
That's right.
source. And I think
So we have to do some groundwork on
Yes.
what exactly that looks like. I just wanted to make sure that it was stated in our policy.
correct. Any other questions? Entertain motion?
I'll make the motion to approve staff's recommendation.
I'll second it with the change about the 7 days.
Understood. Those for motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move right along to 9B. Consider authorizing amendment of professional services agreement with Best, and Krieger.
Yes, what we would like to do is to extend their services through the end of this year, December 31st, with a $475,000 amendment. That brings their total contract value to $900,000. This represents the third change that we've made to their agreement. The first was reassigning Josh as the general counsel, and then when I came on board, to change the agreement administration to myself. I think with the transition that's going on right now, I think the history that BBK brings to the DCA is extremely valuable, and this also will give us enough time to redo the procurement process.
Would that make Josh general counsel as opposed to acting interim general counsel?
That's a good question.
I would remain interim general counsel, but I think we could drop the acting.
It's a
Acting
compromise.
interim.
Win-win.
Okay.
All right. Progress. Any other questions? Steve? Okay, entertain a motion for approval.
I move we approve.
The second? Second. Those for motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Abstentions? Adopted unanimously. We'll move right along to 9C. Considering passing resolution to authorize executive director to negotiate, etc. I think, Joshua, I have a couple of requests to address us, but I think...
Yeah, I'd request that we do a public comment before staff report, please.
Okay. So we'll go right along. I have a couple. Mr. Gary Lipner?
Excuse me? I would request actually that you do the staff report first, because I think we need to hear what the status of this item is.
What was that
actually.
now?
She wants
The
to step-
status of the item is important to the public.
We'll get to it.
Staff report first is what she asked for.
I understood that, and I said we'd get to it.
Not,
Mr. Lipner?
So you're saying you're not going to give us a staff report?
We're
first?
going to get staff report.
but we're not doing it first.
Exactly. Mr. Lipner?
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Estremera and members of the board. My name is Gary Lipner, and I am the Deputy Director of Delta Conveyance at the Department of Water Resources. Thank you for this opportunity to address your board. In light of several letters received yesterday and what appears to be a misunderstanding regarding your agenda item here, number 9C, we are asking that you make this an informational item and delay action until your next meeting. This will provide an opportunity to correct this misunderstanding. As you know, on May 2nd, DWR announced actions to align with the governor's vision for a single tunnel Delta Conveyance project. Our memo to you on that day outlined our actions and the next steps moving forward. DWR leading the environmental planning, with DCA conducting engineering, design, and activities in support of environmental planning. We are asking the DCA to advance engineering and design to address issues of concern among Delta communities and to design mitigation to help reduce impacts. We want to confirm and help clarify for members of the public that DWR will be the lead agency for the CEQA environmental review process as we move forward on implementing the Governor's vision for modernized conveyance with a single tunnel. Our goal is to create an organizational structure that is transparent and capable of developing a project that is responsive to community concerns. We know and greatly appreciate the DCA's full support as we work with the community to collaborate on reducing impacts in the Delta. The DCA will provide an important role in supporting this environmental planning and stakeholder engagement process by providing the engineering, design, and field investigations needed to inform and advance meaningful discussion about impacts and mitigation. We look forward to a substantive public engagement process on Delta Conveyance, as well as on complementary actions in the region, including flood protection and water quality. We look forward to continue working with you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Littner. Next person I have is Mr. Don Natoli.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Supervisor.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and certainly members of the board. I am Don Natoli, member of Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, here on behalf of Sacramento County as well as the Delta Counties Coalition. First, we want to express our thanks to the Department of Water Resources for the request you just heard to have this item, an information item for your agenda today, to allow for further discussions amongst interested parties, certainly Delta interest in particular. And as referenced in Mr. Lipner's comments a moment ago, there were a number of pieces of correspondence yesterday, and I think this board and members of the board were CC'd on that correspondence, in which certainly the Delta Counties Coalition, I know Restore the Delta, and other interested parties weighed in on what's been termed as misunderstanding. I hope that's the case, but nonetheless, we've been assured there will be meetings going forward over the course of the next several weeks, which will hopefully have an opportunity to, I think, weigh out the questions that were raised and get a better understanding of what it was not only intended, but going forward, what would be embodied in what the item was before you today. I would just note, too, it would be very important, I think, to all parties as this issue moves forward, and assuming it comes back on a future agenda, that any agreement that would be structured for action by this body, that the public would have a copy of that and be able to see that in advance of just a resolution which states what the intent is, but to actually know what that agreement would be and what would be embodied. And we trust that may be vetted out in the conversations that we will have over the course of the next few weeks. And again, we appreciate certainly this body and your executive director, but also Department of Water Resources, Ms. Nemeth, and certainly Secretary Crowfoot, their interest in this matter. And again, we look forward to working with the parties to hopefully get a better understanding, but also know what it is that's being proposed for both the DCA, but also for the relook at the conveyance project that may come forward in the future. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Thank you, Supervisor. We'll move right along. Mr. DRJ.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the board to think seriously about this approach, which seems to be keeping the existing $93 million contract with Jacobs and $75 million contract with Fugro going. I think just one example that it may be very expensive to try to do this with small change orders to the existing project. One example I know of is the intake design. I looked into this for a client, North Delta Cares Action Committee, and I found your internal document shows that a team met in 2010 to consider the locations of the intakes. They did not consider construction impacts because they considered those temporary, and they gave a weight of up to 10 points to impacts on local communities and up to 20 points for operational flexibility. It's documentation that your initial analysis of where to put the intakes was completely against the Delta Reform Act, because there are enormous impacts on the small town of Hood and on Clarksburg with the current location of intakes. So the whole approach that you're taking, where we can take this existing location and just look at mitigation, may not work. So that's just one example. Thank you.
Thank you. And one last person, OSHA, Missouri.
Thank you. My name is
Good afternoon.
OSHA Missouri, representing local agencies of the North Delta. And I apologize for previously. I was just trying to understand where it was headed. I did not realize that Mr. Lipner would be here as a public commenter.
Yeah.
Thank you. In any case, I wanted to just respond a little bit to the agenda item that we saw today, the materials that have been made available to us. And I would just say that, yes, if there's some kind of confusion, I really think that it was caused by the agenda item itself, and so maybe that's something that could be corrected, because it's not clear what the amendment to the JEPA that the executive director is being authorized to negotiate. The staff report discusses amendment for planning and environmental review. The explanation that the DCC received from the director of DWR talked about engineering and public engagement, and talked also about changes to the JPA, which aren't mentioned in the agenda item. So, I think there needs to be a lot more clarity and a lot more transparency about what the executive director would be authorized to negotiate, and I think that we would all like to see that happen here, at least, so that we can understand what's being negotiated. I would also point out that on May 2nd, as was mentioned by Mr. Lipner, all the project approvals and the EIR were rescinded and decertified. That's the foundation for this JPA's existence. And without that, I believe that all of the actions that this JPA would take are unauthorized, or what we call ultra vires. Now remember, each of the JPAs relied on this now decertified EIR when it made a decision to send you here to participate in this JPA. And that there is no environmental review for that now. And so those agencies would need to make a decision again based on a different environmental review in order to have this body right here. And adoption of piecemeal exemptions from CEQA, like we see in the agenda here, don't resolve that. So the governor has called for a process. Mr. Lipner mentioned mitigation of impacts. That's a lot different than full analysis of all the options to meet our water supply needs that has been directed by the governor. And we'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Missouri. Okay, I have no further requests to address us on this particular issue. We'll turn it over to staff then.
Thanks, President Estromera.
Yes, Joshua.
In light of Mr. Lipner's comments and the other public interest in this item, staff is modifying its request that the board treat this as an informational item to allow us to go back, do a little bit of work on this, and bring it back to you at a future item board meeting for action. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No, I think information is good.
I think we'll wait until we get further when we come back. So if there's nothing further, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you, Mr. Lipner, for coming by. 9D, discussion and potential creation of an environmental committee of the board of directors. I placed this particular item on the agenda at our last meeting because I just wanted to get some feedback from the board regarding formation of that committee. I set before you a copy of our joint powers agreement for that purpose, because therein is the recital there of the creation of the committee. On page 9, Article 10, it says committees. And I'll just read it since it's not very long. The board shall also appoint one or more advisory committees or establish standing committees, including an environmental compliance and mitigation committee, to be chaired in accordance with Exhibit B, as stated in Article 6.3.1, Exhibit B may be modified by a unanimous vote of all the directors without constituting an amendment to this agreement. The board shall determine the purpose, the need for such committees, and the necessary qualifications for individuals appointed to them. And so that's what the item is today about this particular committee, which is called the Environmental Compliance and Mitigation Committee. In the Exhibit B, there is a table in Exhibit B for rotation of officers. The composition of this particular board is included here, and as we go along, we also have the finance, our finance committee, which is also included, and they are meeting, have been formulated and are meeting regularly. The environmental committee, the two officers, one would have been chaired by the Kern County Water Agency representative. Since we don't have a representative, the vice chair would have been the state water contractor representative, which is Ms. Palmer. I would suggest that since we don't have Kern County on here, that we just advance the table straight up, which would make the chair of the environmental committee the state water contractors at large, which is represented by Ms. Palmer, and the Santa Clara Valley Water District, which is represented by myself as the vice chair. And then we just move up the whole table if and until Kern County or any other directors join us, then you know, we'll add them into this rotation of officers, as we will with the chair and everything else. So I think if that's okay, we could take some action just on that. But I wanted to get some feedback from the board with respect to, for instance, I assume that what we could do is once we appoint the other members of the committee, that they would get together and write out in pretty good detail a proposed work plan and policy with respect to their activities that we would then review and approve. So I think what we need to do is think about how many folks should be on the committee, how should we appoint them, and so on. That's basically what I wanted to do today, and then later on in our next meeting or the next time we meet about it, we can then take some action on all this.
How large did you visualize this committee?
I had no visualization. I just wondered what a good working committee number would be. It could be, I suggest that you know, each board member appoint perhaps 3 members maybe. That makes it 12, and 2 of us 14 or something like that. Or it could be 12. I don't know whatever the number is that might be comfortable. Yeah. 12, or it has to be, you know, either 12, 16.
So like the finance committee has 11 people on it, and it's, you know.
It'd have to be something like that. So 12 I think is a decent number, because if we have 4 of us and we all appoint 3, I think that's a good work. I mean, if we want to do more, certainly we can do more. So that's, I'll take your suggestions.
And would you, in terms of membership on this committee, is it like of the same pool as, say, the finance committee is, or?
There's just the 2 officers, and this committee is allowed to be, as you know, consistent with our policies, is allowed to be employees, members of the public, who you know, whoever we want on the committee. Our policy says that we can appoint anyone we want to on the committees as long as they're qualified to serve.
Chair Estromera,
Yes.
I would suggest that 3 might be too many, that maybe 2 per director, seeing as how we have already a president and a vice president, or chair and vice chair, that would be 10 on the committee. That wouldn't stop anybody else from the public or any other interested parties from attending the committee meeting and providing input. And the committee as such would be an advisory body to this board.
Yes.
Giving us advice on matters within their purview. So I don't want to make it too unwieldy.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering which number is better, so. Okay. So 2 or 3, so 10 or 12.
10 sounds better than 12, I guess.
Well, it sounds better, but let me say that this is not going to be just a sleepy, boring committee. It says compliance.
Hey, look at
Okay,
it.
let me remind you.
It's not going to be boring.
It says it's to me it's a pretty serious committee, so this is going to be a lot of work. So I don't think it's a ministerial committee. It's a working committee. So we need as many sacrificial lambs as we can find. That's why I thought 12 was better. But I'm open. I just want suggestions of what we could do. But there will be a lot of work, I think.
What kind of staff support would this committee have?
Well, whatever we need, because I think, again, this is a very important committee. As part of the Joint Powers Agreement, all the agencies were very clear about our commitment to environmental compliance. And we wanted to be very sensitive and responsive to the community. So that's why I think it's going to be a committee that's got a lot of work before it. So it's not just environmental compliance in the traditional sense, but it's also working with the community to make sure that we talk about mitigation. And really the mitigation to me is going to be even bigger than the compliance itself.
So basically, you're also, potentially this is open to, various different stakeholders in the
Yes.
community, that type of a thing.
Yes. And I think the more the merrier, only because of that, and because I think we want to make sure that we have people in the community, such as some of the supervisors that appeared before us, some of the members of the community here that helped us draw out the DCA insignia, and so on. I think it's important for us to, this is a statewide committee, so we are going to have people from all over, but I think most importantly from the local Delta community. Yes, Stephen.
So I agree that the intent of including in these bylaws that there be an environmental compliance and mitigation committee, I support that. The idea of the officers, given where we're at, I'm fine with that. One thing for consideration is that we have further discussion as we go forward on the makeup of the committee, as we kind of get, as we work through issues with the state and understanding kind of how they fit and how we fit. And then even as our board considers how we would like to comprise the environmental compliance and mitigation committee. So I think that my thought is thinking through what the composition of that committee is.
Yes.
I think we need a little more time to formulate some of this. As you can see from hearing folks that are, stakeholders in this, that there's a lot more to consider, and a lot more to consider in terms of as we start looking at the impacts and looking at the mitigation procedures, that type of thing. So we really do need to think about.
Yeah, I just wanted to surface the discussion. This will take a little time to do, and then of course we still have a lot of leeway to work on where we are with the administration, or what the tunnel will look like, and so on. So you're right. There's a lot of other issues that we've got to deal with. So I just wanted to surface this so that the community knew that we're discussing this, that this is very important to us. And I expect that you will all be thinking about what we can do with that committee, what it should be doing, how you could participate, and then we could get a lot more feedback from the community. So I just thought I would surface it today. That's why it's only here for discussion. And as we go along, I think as you mentioned, after we have a little bit more meat on the bones and we find out where we are on the sizing and so on, that then we can again I'll put it back on the agenda. By then, I think we'll talk with the community a little bit, and we'll get more feedback from the community. And so, yeah, we will take a little bit more time to discuss it.
Yeah, because we need
and
some
see how it
input, like
looks.
on the engineering, and we were talking about intake locations, that type
Yeah.
of a thing. We need
Yeah.
to hear more about that in terms of how this is shaping up
Sure.
before we kind of, so that we can address the issues that are real.
Yeah, no, understood. I just wanted people to know that it was going to happen, that it's important to us, and we have it at the top of our list. So, okay, great. Well, thanks for the discussion. And as I mentioned, we expect that this will be a very important committee for us. We expect that the community is going to be very actively engaged in the committee's work. We look forward to your suggestions with respect to the formation of the committee and the committee's work. And I'll bring it back on the agenda when we have a little bit more development and we're closer with CEQA issues and so on. And then maybe we got a better idea of where to go. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understood where it was. So thanks again. That was the discussion, and we'll move along then to the Executive Director's report.
All right, well, you have
Catherine?
thank you. You have a copy of my report here in your packet. I just want to highlight that we're in close collaboration with DCO and Gary Lipner. Thank you for those. Is he still here? Thanks for those words. Working very collaboratively with them on this pivot in the program. The governor and Secretary Crowfoot have discussed publicly around the single tunnel conveyance project. We're engaged and excited about a transparent and collaborative process with the stakeholders and everything involved in the engineering work and stakeholder engagement to get that done. We've been collaborating weekly. We've finalized negotiations and, we're in the final throes of negotiations with Parsons on task order for their program management support services, largely around cost and schedule management and contract administration support. We've been working very closely with the communications team on what stakeholder engagement support would look like from an engineering perspective. We've been revising our work plans, completely pivoting, focusing on a lot of the questions that were left unanswered in previous work that would benefit from additional engineering support. And then, some of the internal works around the e-builder systems, payments, and our annual budget submission. So highlight what we've been focused on the last month. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Pretty clear, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Move right along to the General Counsel's report.
Thank you. So my written report is in your packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. The one item I wanted to just highlight was the purchasing policy, and thank the board for approving that as an action item.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move right along then to the Treasurer's report.
Thank you, President
Yes,
Estromera. My report is in your packet, and I have nothing to add, but we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Guess we're happy as long as these numbers are pluses.
Well, there was a minus in there.
Well, it's okay, as long as the bottom line is a plus.
I mean, parentheses, there's a parentheses in there.
Any questions? Other than that? Thank you, Jude.
Thank you, President Estromera.
Okay, any future agenda? Well, let's see if there are any
reports.
verbal reports. I don't see any. Okay. Future agenda items?
I have something
Sarah have one?
that we should address at some point.
Yes.
I mean, basically, our website is like really horrible. And it's not, I have to say this, I mean, seriously, it is not conducive to our new opportunity to be open and transparent and incorporate our inputs from from stakeholders and let people know what's going on. For example, I mean, I know we have everything kind of all tidily packaged in our board packets, but it'd be really nice to say have a link that says, well, here's the governor's executive order. Here's some of the letters that have come out, that type of a thing. And so I would like to see us. I know we don't want to get overly flashy, but web pages are not hard. I mean, seriously, they're not. And so so basically, I think we should aim toward our new opportunities for transparency and collaborativeness in our web page and make it so that the public can look at this and go, oh yeah, we can see where this is coming in, and I think that would help us out a lot, and it would help the stakeholders out a lot as well.
Great, thank you. We don't need that to be an agenda item. I think the staff is
At some point,
responsive to it.
at some point,
Well, at
maybe.
some point we will. When you look at it, if it doesn't get any better, we'll put it on the agenda. Well, great. Okay, so if we don't have any other future items, then we'll adjourn. Thank you all for being here.